We take a diagonal slice of the company. So it's top to bottom across all functions, 120 people or so at a time. It was very presenter driven, very entertaining. And I also started to get a really broad base of perspective on business because we had a lot of different clients in different industries. And I'd worked with the whole company from top to bottom. So it was like this incredible fire hose of, oh, this is what business really is.
Yeah, another appreciation coming your way, Steve. I'm just looking at the pieces of the puzzle and the dots that I want to connect here. You shared a minute ago that you were always a little bit different growing up, different in a good way. And you've shared that both and is a mental model that you use to help you keep making progress. And you shared that you are an eternal optimist. And I want to just comment that the things that I've seen so far would lead me to believe that, yes, incredibly resilient. And yes, everything is happening not to me, but through me or for me. So I feel that you are embodying that eternal optimism. I'd love to go back to that 87 to 94 when you were getting your chops in training, and then you joined the Tom Peters Company. What was that phase in your life like when you were starting to become really good at business?
Yeah, it's a great question because it was when I look at my business career, my successful business career. So not phase one where I had the company that crashed and burned. That was in the commodities futures business, okay, which I was entirely ill-suited for and hated.
Okay.
It's interesting to have your own company and hate it, but that's where I was. And then it went down in flames because I had a financial partner that bailed on me. So when that all shifted and I got into the training and development and consulting and all that, which was the late 80s through the early 90s, I really did have an opportunity to get really, really good at being a front of the room person. So I worked with a company that was international company that was based in Denmark. And they had a really terrific, in today's language, we'd call it a cultural change program. Back then, it was more of a customer service kind of a thing. Okay. But we would work with entire companies and over a period of time, maybe a couple of years, and we put everybody in that company through this 2-day workshop. We take a diagonal slice of the company, so it's top to bottom across all functions, 120 people or so at a time. It was very presenter-driven, very entertaining, a lot of stories and a lot of like skits and all kinds of stuff. And I just, I just loved it. And so in a very short period of time, I got very unique and intensive experience. And I also started to get a really broad base of perspective on business because we had a lot of different clients in different industries. And I'd worked with the whole company from top to bottom. So it was like this incredible fire hose of, oh, this is what business really is. And then one of my colleagues who was on the sales side of the house was recruited by the Tom Peters Company. And this was all in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. And, for your listeners who are unfamiliar with Tom Peters, he's now 80 years old, but is, no exaggeration, the most significant and influential management thinker of our age. So his original book was called In Search of Excellence, which changed the landscape of business and what it means to be in business. And he's just now looking at retirement, and just came out with a new book like 2 months ago at 80 years old. So he was one of my mentors, and so this person that I worked with at the other company got recruited by Tom Peters to go to work at his company, and she told me she was leaving, and I said, "What about me?" And she introduced me to the president of the company at the time, is a guy named Jim Kouzes.
Okay.
Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner are the authors of a book called The Leadership Challenge, which just came out in its 7th edition. And they are the world preeminent experts on leadership. And even though it was the Tom Peters Company, most of the work that we did was built around the Leadership Challenge. So Jim hired me at the Tom Peters Company. eventually made me a vice president of the company. And I spent 6 years teaching and working with executives around the leadership challenge model, and got a really in-depth. I mean, that's really what set me on the path for leadership.
Okay.
And my work is very deeply informed by Kouzes and Posner's work.
Mm.
So it was, again, I could not have planned that. It couldn't be, okay, I'll spend a few years doing this, and then I'll go over to this company, and then I'll have the Tom Peters name on my resume, and then I can go out on my own, and I can write my own books, but that's exactly the way it worked, and couldn't have planned it any better.
Amazing. Things just happen. You put yourself in the way of change, of opportunity, and it happened. And as I may have mentioned earlier, one of the things that I was so inspired to be able to have the chance to meet you today is because you impacted my life. And I guess it was about 20 years, and that's the anniversary of your Radical Leap. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that book, Radical Leap, came together and publishing that?
Yeah. So when after I'd been at the Tom Peters Company for a while, I kind of got the bug. There's a couple things I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to do more keynotes. We were doing a lot of offsite workshops and 3, 4, 5 day things. Sometimes I wanted to do more speaking and tap into more of that kind of entertainer part of my experience that I've had. So we made a mutual decision that I should do that on my own.
Okay.
So it took me 6 months to transition out of the Tom Peters Company and move into just being Farber. So in 2000 is when I went out on my own, and I started to ask myself a question, which eventually led to the Radical Leap. That question was, based on this amazing experience that I've had, and all the people that I've met, all the great business people that I've met, and the terrible leaders that I've met, and the mentors that I've had, Tom and Jim and a guy named Terry Pierce, and based on all that, what do I think about all this? That's the question I asked. What's my opinion on all of this? Because I've been teaching other people's bodies of work and got my own experience in the process. And another way I asked the question was, based on everything that I've learned, if I had the power to make everybody get it, just get it, what would it be? What would I have them get? What would I have them do? What would I have them change? What would I have them engage in every day? And it was in answering that question that the framework for the Radical Leap emerged, and that is love, energy, audacity, and proof. They would cultivate love, they would generate energy, they would inspire audacity, and they would provide proof. So once that became clear to me, that I just started to flesh that out. I said, okay, there's my book. Now I need to work on it. And it took me years to write that sucker. It's a small book, but it took years. And it's written, as you know, in the form of a novel. So it gave me a chance to be creative again in terms of dialogue and characters and story, and as well as explaining and teaching what those elements are. And to this day, nearly 20 years later, most of what I do is built around what has become a methodology of love, energy, audacity, and proof. So I still speak about that in my keynotes. It's evolved, and I have lots of amazing examples of each of those by now. But I also use that when I work with companies who want to embrace that in their culture, make it a part of how they do business. Mm-hmm. So it has been field tested now for 20 years. And you read that book a long time ago, Matt, but I have people who've read the book for the first time last week.
Yes.
That still respond that way. So it's been an amazing, incredibly gratifying thing. I don't know how the hell it happened. I have to say, yeah, I just tried to give voice to what I believed to be true from my experience. And my biggest challenge, or my biggest concern, when that book was first published, was I was afraid that people wouldn't think that the content of the book lived up to the title. Because the title is The Radical Leap. And to me, the stuff in that book just didn't seem all that radical. It just seemed obvious. And as it turns out, it's pretty radical. The idea that love should be first and foremost in the way you do business as a competitive advantage and as a leader, as a business leader, and in your company, turns out it's a pretty radical thought. And it's, it's what I continue to work with today. It's helping people to figure out what should that look like in the way that we do business. What should love look like in the way that we run this company, or I manage this team, or whatever the context is, or teach my students in my classroom. I have teachers and educators all over the country that have embraced Leap as an educational model, which again, I never planned for that. It wasn't on my radar screen, but there it is.